everybody and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Transformers Kingdom Deluxe class Waspinator, probably the character that I was the most excited for to come out of Wave 4, and ever since really Hasbro and Takara announced they were doing Beast Wars for the War for Cybertron trilogy, as I just absolutely love this guy. In the original Beast Wars series, Waspinator was probably my go-to character besides Megatron. I just loved his voice, loved his personality, and actually really loved his design, and I'm so happy to say that Hasbro and Takara really did knock it out of the park here with this War for Cybertron Waspinator. He looks so cool. Waspinator under attack, Waspinator retreat. He's just so awesome. It's just the character himself immortalized here in the plastic form. Honestly, so happy to actually get this guy. Now sadly, I never picked up the Thrilling 30 figure, which was a decision that I still regret even today, and judging by some of the images online, I don't necessarily think this particular Waspinator is better than the previous version. The previous version just appears to be a little bulkier and perhaps a little bigger in terms of mass when in comparison to this guy, but for an actual War for Cybertron Waspinator, he's turned out a lot better than I suspected. Now, in regards to actual Beast Wars animation accuracy, he's pretty spot on. I'd say that out of all of the Predacons, him, Black Arachnia and Megatron are actually fairly faithful. He only really differs in the placement here of the Wasp legs for robot mode, but other than that, it's a really nice representation of the character, and it's all got to do with the detail. The detail on this guy is superb. Check out that head sculpt. It looks remarkable. You can see how we've got that almost honeycombed effect going on for the eyes. I think that is just so well done. He does in fact have purple light piping, but sadly you do have to have an intense amount of light actually shining through the back before they do illuminate. But you can see the amazing attention to detail in regards to the yellow painted teeth. I love these sections here on the top of the head, all picked out really nicely. The black and yellow stripes look fantastic, and the actual chest region as well has also turned out a lot better than I suspected. You can see how the wasp head does split into two, which we'll touch base more with when we go through transformation, but you can see here the arms, all of the yellow paint apps have turned out so crisp and precise. It really does look wicked. And check out the transparent purple that we've got going on here for the wings. You can see all of the details of what I presume are in fact veins. It would have been great if you could have actually separated these two pieces much like we saw on the show, but nevertheless I think the detailing on this once again has turned out so nicely, and you can also see some fantastic texture detail here on this actual green section. As we turn our attention here down to the lower section of the figure, there is a little discrepancy in regards to the cast yellow plastic and in fact the actual paint, and it would have been awesome if they could have actually painted the yellow thighs, as this does look a little flat when in comparison to the vibrancy that we get here, but that's merely just a minor critique. You can see the wicked glossy black paint we've got going on for the thighs. I think the paint apps here for the legs have turned out super cool, and even the foot design is awesome. Of course, we've got the massive wasp abdomen here at the back, much like we saw in the original Beast Wars series. I think that's all turned out really nicely, although sadly this guy is very hollow. You can see basically the entire back of the legs are hollow, as so are the back of the arms, which ultimately does make this guy feel a little lighter when in comparison to some of the other characters that we've got in the line, such as Scorponok and Cheetor. Now, Waspinator comes with one accessory, that being this blaster, and I'll be completely honest and say that in regards to a weapon, this is really weak. This simply is just part of the abdomen section, the back of it, that pops off, and it's got no actual blaster piece. On the Thrilling 30 figure, I believe there was a transparent section that actually flipped forwards to create an almost blaster, but here it is merely just the sting of the wasp. It's not the end of the world, and to be honest, I'm actually glad they gave him something, because if they had decided not to, then I definitely would have had more of an issue with that. But it would have been cool if they could have just added a tiny attachment here on the bottom, but due to the hollow spacing, there's no doubt going to be a third-party company that come up with some sort of upgrade. This can be held into either of his hands, and from certain angles you can definitely give the impression that this is Waspinator's blaster, and if you don't wish to display this on the figure, you can simply come here to the back and of course attach it here to fill out the abdominal section. Now, he also does in fact have a Predacon insignia here on the top of the shoulder. This has been printed really nicely, and just taking a look here at the detailing of the fingers, I also think these two look awesome. His articulation for a War for Cybertron figure is once again astonishing. So for the head, we get a ball joint which can in fact actually tilt left to right to a fantastic degree. He can look up slightly, although it is slightly restricted due to this back section, as well as down. It can look left to right. We do get full ball joints here at the wings, which you'll see more of when we actually get him transformed into Wasp mode, but you can compress these if you wish for a slightly more neutral, cleaner look, perhaps if he's just stationary on the ground, although of course more than likely you'll want them raised up. We do get hinge joints here at the shoulders, which can hinge out to the sides, do the full rotation here at the bicep, 90 here at the elbow, full wrist rotation, which is superb. Surprisingly, a waist rotation, and considering the way this guy transforms, I was not expecting that at all. The legs can kick forwards that far as well as back to that far before being being slightly restricted here by the abdominal section. They can hinge out to the sides, rotation at the thigh, 90 there at the knee, and the foot is actually fantastic. This can pivot forwards and backwards, as well as, of course, rock side to side. So fantastic range of motion here on Waspinator, considering that he's a deluxe class. Now, turning to some qualms that I have with this guy, sadly, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. So minus the critique that I have with the blaster, I don't necessarily think this guy stays together all that well, especially where this torso is concerned. It takes literally nothing to detach this tiny tab, which really is just held in via friction to this slot, and honestly that is a big letdown in my opinion. This should have been a proper clip to solidify that, and also the actual wasp head itself does also have a tendency to flip forward, seeing as there is actually no tab or slot. There is a tiny little tab here, but it is way too big to actually fit into this section. So sadly, I do actually think the structural integrity of this guy is slightly compromised, and if they could have added a few different tabs, it definitely would have helped to solidify him. But in regards to visual aesthetic, oh my goodness, did they absolutely knock it out of the park, especially where that Waspinator head is concerned. Turning to some Predacon Kingdom size comparisons, we've of course got Waspinator compared next to both Scorponok and Black Arachnia, and honestly, I think this is the dream team. These are looking fantastic. We really just need Tarantulas and Pterosaur now, and I'll be pretty happy with the Predacon lineup. It is a slight shame that the Predacons have taken a slight backbench when in comparison to the Maximals for the War for Cybertron line. It would have been awesome if they could have maybe just scrapped the G1 characters for this particular chapter and focused solely on Beast Wars, but I completely understand as to why they had to give us a mix, just in case the reception to Beast Wars wasn't as good as at least I think it's turned out to be. I actually think that these guys have been received really well by the fan base, and I personally am super glad to have updated representations of these characters in my collection, seeing as I wasn't around when the original Beast Wars cartoon series did debut, and I never picked up some of those thrilling Verti figures, so it's been an absolute blast to be able to experience some of these characters for the first time round with modern technology and some really awesome engineering. Now you can see that he's a little taller when in comparison to Scorponok, which is really the only character that I think slightly fails in regards to scale. In the show, Scorponok was definitely a little bigger of a character in regards to how tall he was, but I think the scale between Waspinator and Black Arachnia is pretty spot on. You can see how she's ever so slightly bigger than him, but in regards to actual mass, I think Waspinator is probably the heavier figure. And bringing Megatron into the equation, yes, here we've got the Kingdom Predacons, at least inspired from Beast Wars so far. Of course, we've got some of the fossilizers, but I shan't throw them into the mix, just as I don't really count them as proper Beast Wars characters. But you can see, I think the scale between Waspinator and Megatron works really nicely, and what a team this has turned out to be. Like I said, when I did the comparison between the deluxes, I really hope that this rumoured upcoming Golden Disc collection turns out to be true, and we can actually get Pterosaur as well as Tarantulas into the collection, as that would be so cool. Now, transformation for Waspinator, honestly, is actually not that complex, which I was quite surprised to see. It's more fiddly than anything, and I definitely think you'll see that during this transformation process. So, without further ado, Waspinator Beast Mode, or Waspinator Terrorize! To begin with, what I personally like to do is come here to the heel spurs and just collapse these in over the top section of the foot, just so that this section fills out the hollow space. So just snap that into place. If it hasn't done so already, you are going to want to detach this plate here from the torso region, and then subsequently take this piece and actually separate it here from this particular region. So these two tabs do in fact lock into those slots. So just pull all of this out and then take the wasp head. For bot mode, it is split. For wasp mode, you're going to want to compress it and just split those mandibles out a little bit. We can then take this tiny slot and peg it here into this tab. So take the head, arch that back slightly, and just snap that there into place. What we can then do is come to the shoulders, bring those in, and repeat the same process. Rotate here at the bicep, and then here for the wrists, you're going to want to rotate them so that the back of the hand is in fact facing towards where the wings are. So just repeat the same process here, rotate that around. You're then going to want to hinge, and this tiny little circular peg will in fact peg into this circular slot. So just snap that in there, and of course come here to this side and snap that in there, and you can see how we do in fact create this tab section, which we will actually use in order to lock all this into place. Then you're going to want to take this, rotate this here all the way around, so essentially flip it. This tab will then peg here into this slot, so bring the knees up and just snap that in there really securely. We can then take the wasp legs. Now they're almost on soft ratchet joints, despite this being a mushroom peg. The way they've designed it is slightly indented, so you're going to want to rotate that here until it does slightly click into place, and then come to this side and of course repeat the same process. We can then bring the two halves together, although more than likely they will in fact attach, so just peg that together. And for this, these two tabs here and here will in fact slide into these two slots, and then these two slots will be housed via this tab. So bring the abdominal section down, so we create something like this. shift this up, give these here a nice push, and then come here, push that in, and then we can just take the feet, collapse them here over the top, angle the legs appropriately, and there you've got Waspinator fully transformed up into the Wasp mode, and actually not looking too bad at all in my personal opinion. I think this has turned out so much better than I suspected, especially for a deluxe class. Now in regards to the detail, I actually think the head sculpt is fantastic. It looks really, really creepy, and you can see how we've got that almost honeycombed effect. I'm sure there's a more technical term for this, but wasps sort of have this really weird eye texture, and I think Hasbro and Takara have replicated that perfectly here. I think this looks so cool. We've got the antennas here at the top, which too have also been sculpted and detailed really nicely. We've got those creepy mandibles, which I'm sure he can feast on some of the Maximals with, and you can see the legs too. I actually don't think have turned out too bad at all. You can see some nice detail, of course, where they would in fact articulate in real life. You can see the tiny little feelers here for the feet, looking really cool, and the way the abdominal section comes together I think is awesome. I think the paintwork on this has turned out so nicely. You can see literally no paint bleeds on this at all, which is superb, and you can see this whole section as well as the wings textured really nicely. Of course, from a frontal perspective, you have got the robot mode legs folded up, which doesn't look the best, but to be fair, it doesn't look the worst. From a side perspective, you can see I actually think this guy stacks up pretty well, especially when in comparison to some of the other beast characters that we've gotten in the line so far. In regards to articulation, these here can hinge forwards and backwards, mainly due to transformation, and the same can also be said for these ones, but as mentioned, seeing as they are indented, it will in fact actually more than likely detach this entire region, which much like robot mode is another issue I have. I don't necessarily think this holds together all that securely. We sadly don't get any form of rotation here at the head, although the head can hinge up and down, which I guess is decent. The mandibles can open and close, which is really nice, and the antennas too can also rotate left to right. We get a full range of motion in regards to a ball joint here for the wings, so you can hinge them up, hinge them down, or actually compress them here to create a slightly sleeker, more neutral look, as if perhaps Waspinator is just resting on the ground, ready for his commands from Megatron. Here for a Predacon Deluxe Beast Mode comparison, you can see Waspinator compared next to both Scorponok as well as Black Arachnia, and you can see that he's actually a fairly big Deluxe class in Beast form. Just comparing him here next to Scorponok, which is actually one of the biggest Deluxe Predacons that we've gotten so far, you can see that he is not that far off this actual scale. And then if I just take Black Arachnia, you can see that of course she is a lot smaller just due to how she condenses for transformation, but not a particularly bad scale by any stretch of the imagination. Of course, just to wrap things up, let's bring in leader class T-Rex Beast Wars Megatron. So you can see here the Predacons that we've gotten from the line so far, and I also don't think that he scales too badly with Megatron either. Let's just bring him in here for a closer look so that you guys can really see roughly how big he is stacked next to Megatron. You can see there. Not looking too bad at all. And so, some final thoughts for the Transformers Kingdom Deluxe class Waspinator. Overall, I actually think this guy's turned out really cool. He's heaps of fun, mainly down to the simple fact that his character in the show was awesome, so you've already got a great personality to actually match with this particular figure. But I also think that Hasbro and Takara have done a commendable job with this guy. I still don't think that he is quite up there with the Thrilling 30 figure just by going off some of the images shown online. That figure does seem a little bigger and a little better built in regards to plastic quality, but this guy definitely isn't half bad at all. I actually think he's on the better end of the spectrum in regards to War for Cybertron Deluxe figures. His accuracy to the show is actually pretty spot on, despite there being some discrepancies in regards to where the Wasp legs end up in robot mode. I'd say that he's near enough spot on, and I actually don't think that his colour is too off either, which is something that you can't necessarily say for some of the other Beast Wars characters in the lineup so far. The robot mode looks fantastic in regards to proportions. I think they're all near enough spot on, including that rather large abdomen section that we've got stuck on the back of his butt. I actually think that's very accurate to how it appeared in the show. I think the wing detailing is fantastic with all of the little veins in. Of course, I'd love to be able to actually separate the two wings that have this time round been molded together, but that's just a minor critique. His weapon is definitely on the weaker side. If they could have just added a slight flip out nozzle, that would have been awesome, but as mentioned beforehand, there's so many hollow spacing that there will be no doubt a third party company that come out with some type of attachment, or may in fact actually come up with a brand new weapon itself. I think the articulation is really well done, especially for his character design. I was expecting it to be a little compromised, but I am slightly let down by the build quality. The actual robot mode doesn't hold together the best. You saw in regards to the waist joint, it is easily able to be detached, and it is a shame that the actual Wasp head doesn't necessarily lock in to the front section of the torso. The transformation is straightforward enough. It's actually really fun, really simplistic to do, although rather refreshing, and is unlike anything that we've seen from the Beast Wars characters so far. The Wasp mode too, I also think's turned out really nicely, especially the detailing in the actual Wasp head. That is fantastic, with the mandibles and that almost honeycombed effect that we've got going on for the eyes. It all works really well. There is some underkibble, but that is to be expected due due to the nature of the design, and some of my discrepancies from robot mode do sadly still carry over here into Wasp mode. Most noticeably would be the fact that the legs don't really lock into where the arms do connect, so that once again is a shame, but definitely doesn't compromise enjoyability. I've had heaps of fun posing this guy alongside some of the other Predacons, and just genuinely messing around with him. He's a fun and fantastic figure, and he has lived up to my expectations, and definitely has been worth the wait, as of course this guy's coming out in Wave 4. I cannot believe that we're 4 waves into Kingdom, and here's hoping that that upcoming rumoured Wave 5 does actually materialise, and that this guy isn't the last Predacon to actually grace the War for Cybertron trilogy. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I'd love to know down in the comment section below on what you thought of both the review and of course Waspinator, and until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.